Cordelia's wedding dress tore against the splintered fence as she vaulted over it, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Behind her, the church bells of Millbrook Village rang out in confused celebration. A wedding ceremony abandoned mid-vow when the bride had bolted from the altar. "My wagon stage leaves in 5 minutes with or without you." The giant cowboy's voice boomed across the dusty main street, his weathered hand gripping the reins of 6 restless horses. Maverick Ironstone stood 7 feet tall in his worn leather boots, his broad shoulders casting a shadow that seemed to swallow half the settlement. His steel-gray eyes locked onto Cordelia's as she stumbled toward him, her white silk train dragging through the dirt. "You came back," she gasped, lifting her skirts to run faster. "I thought when you left yesterday that I'd given up on you." Eric's laugh was rough as sandpaper. "Lady, I've been fighting for you since the day we met at the trading post. I just decided to stop fighting fair." Behind them, angry shouts erupted from the church. Cordelia's intended groom, the pompous banker Reginald Ashworth, emerged with his face purple with rage. "Stop that woman. She's stolen my bride-price jewelry." Maverick swung down from the driver's seat in one fluid motion, his massive frame moving with surprising grace. The only thing stolen here was her choice. He growled, extending his hand to Cordelia. "But we can discuss that later. Right now, we've got about 3 minutes before half the town comes after us with shotguns." Cordelia didn't hesitate. She placed her trembling hand in his calloused palm and felt electricity shoot up her arm. 6 months of secret meetings, stolen. Kisses behind the general store, and whispered promises under starlit skies had led to this moment. Maverick had promised to take her away from the suffocating expectations of Millbrook Village, away from the arranged marriage her father had forced upon her. "I can't go back," she whispered as he lifted her onto the wagon seat with ease. "Father will disown me. The whole town will. The whole town can kiss my boots," Maverick interrupted, settling beside her and snapping the reins. The horses lunged forward, kicking up a cloud of dust. "We're heading west, Cordelia. To California, where nobody gives a damn about your daddy's bank account or your ex-fiance's hurt feelings." The wagon lurched as they hit the main road leading out of town. Cordelia looked back once to see her father, Judge Cornelius Fairweather, standing in the church doorway, with his fist raised in fury. For a moment, guilt twisted in her stomach like a knife. Then Maverick's free hand found hers, strong and warm and certain. "No regrets," he said, reading her expression. "From here on out, we write our own story." The wind whipped through her dark hair as they raced toward the horizon, leaving behind everything she'd ever known. In the distance, thunder rumbled either from an approaching storm or the hoofbeats of pursuit. Either way, there was no turning. Back now. The wagon wheels hit every rut and rock on the old frontier trail, jarring Cordelia's teeth and making her wedding dress billow like a white flag of surrender. 3 hours out from Millbrook Village, Maverick finally allowed the horses to slow to a steady trot, his keen eyes scanning the landscape behind them. "See any dust clouds?" Cordelia asked, twisting in her seat to peer back down the trail. Elaborate wedding hairdo had come completely undone, dark waves whipping around her face in the prairie wind. "Not yet, but they're coming." Maverick's jaw was set in a hard line. "Your daddy's got the sheriff in his pocket, and Ashworth's got enough money to hire half the territory as bounty hunters. We need to reach Devil's Canyon before nightfall." Cordelia had heard whispers about Devil's Canyon, a treacherous stretch of badlands where decent folk feared to tread. Outlaws, claim jumpers, and worse made their homes in those red rock formations. "Is it safe?" Maverick's grin was sharp as a blade. "Safe? No. But it's where they won't follow. I've got friends there who owe me favors." The wagon hit a particularly vicious pothole, sending Cordelia tumbling against Maverick's solid chest. For a moment she stayed there, breathing in his scent of leather and sage and something indefinably masculine. His arm tightened around her, protective and possessive. "I never thanked you," she murmured against his shirt. "For giving me a choice." "Don't thank me yet," he replied, his voice rougher than usual. "We've got 1,000 miles of hard country ahead of us, and every man in 3 territories looking for the runaway bride and the giant who stole her." A rifle shot cracked across the prairie, echoing off distant mesas. Both of them froze. Then Maverick cursed under his breath. On the horizon behind them, a dust cloud was rising. Riders, at least a dozen of them, coming fast. "Hold on," Maverick growled, snapping the reins hard. The horses surged forward, transforming from a trot to a full gallop. The wagon bounced and swayed dangerously, threatening to tip with every sharp turn. Cordelia gripped the seat with white knuckles, her heart in her throat as another shot rang out, closer this time. She could see them now, Sheriff Morrison leading the charge, with Reginald Ashworth right beside him on his prize stallion. Her father rode third, his usually pristine suit coated with trail dust. There, Maverick pointed ahead to where the trail forked. The left path led toward the distant mountains, while the right disappeared into a maze of red canyon walls. Devil's Canyon. "Once we're in there, they'll have to follow us single file, and I know every twist and turn." But the pursuing riders were gaining ground, their fresher horses eating up the distance. Another shot whistled past Cordelia's ear, close enough that she felt the wind of its passage. Fear and exhilaration battled in her chest. She'd never felt so alive, so terrifyingly free. "Maverick," she said, having to shout over the thunder of hooves and creaking wagon wheels, "whatever happens, I don't regret running away with you." Looked at her then, really looked at her, his gray eyes fierce with something that made her stomach flutter. "Good," he said, "'cause I'm planning to marry you myself, once we get clear of this mess." The canyon entrance loomed ahead, narrow and dark as a mouth. Behind them, Sheriff Morrison raised his rifle for another shot. Cordelia closed her eyes and held on tight as they plunged into the shadows. Leaving the familiar world forever behind, the canyon walls rose around them like the ribs of some ancient beast. Red sandstone painted with shadows that shifted and danced in the dying afternoon light. Maverick guided the wagon through twists and turns that seemed impossible, the wheels sometimes running along ledges barely wide enough for the axles. "How do you know this place so well?" Cordelia asked, her voice echoing strangely off the stone. Walls. The pursuing riders had been forced to slow, their horses picking their way carefully over the treacherous ground. "Spent 2 years hiding out here after I had a disagreement with the law," Maverick replied, his attention focused on navigating a particularly narrow passage. "Met a Navajo medicine man named Hosteen Yazzie, who taught me the old paths." He saved my life more than once. A rifle shot boomed behind them, but the sound was muffled and distant now. Sheriff Morrison's voice carried on the desert wind, cursing their luck as his posse struggled to follow the wagon's trail over bare rock and shifting sand. "They're falling behind," Cordelia observed, hope rising in her chest. "For now." But Morrison's persistent as a rattlesnake, and your daddy's got enough influence to call in favors from here to Santa Fe. We need to reach Yazzie's camp before full dark. The wagon emerged from the narrow passage into a hidden valley, green with cottonwoods, and alive with the sound of running water. Cordelia gasped at the beauty of Etofta, the harsh desert. This hidden oasis seemed like paradise. Smoke rose from a cluster of traditional hogans nestled against the valley wall. As their wagon approached, a figure emerged from the largest, dwelling an elderly Navajo man with silver hair braided down his back and eyes like chips of obsidian. "Maverick Ironheart," the man said in accented English, using what Cordelia realized must be Maverick's Navajo name. "You bring trouble to our peaceful valley." "I bring a woman who needs sanctuary, old friend," Maverick replied, swinging down from the wagon seat. "And yes, trouble follows us like shadows at sunset." Hosteen Yazzie's penetrating gaze shifted to Cordelia, still sitting in her torn wedding dress. She felt as if he could see straight through to her soul. "She has chosen a hard path," he said. "Finally, the old ways are breaking apart. The white man's law and the red man's wisdom do not walk the same trail, which is why we need your help," Maverick said. "We need to disappear for a while, become different people. Can you do it?" The medicine man was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. Behind them, the sound of approaching horses echoed faintly from the canyon entrance. "There is a ceremony," he said at last, "a ritual of transformation, of new beginning. It requires sacrifice. You must leave behind who you were to become who you are meant to be. Cordelia climbed down from the wagon, her legs shaky from the long ride. What kind of sacrifice? Your old names, your old lives, your old fears, Yazzie replied. You came here as the runaway daughter of a judge and the outlaw who stole her. You must leave as something else entirely. Maverick stepped closer to Cordelia, his hand finding hers. What do you say? Are you ready to be reborn? The sound of horses was getting closer now, echoing off the canyon walls. In minutes, the posse would reach the valley entrance. Cordelia looked at the peaceful Hogans, at the wise old man who offered them transformation, at Maverick, whose love had already changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Yes, she whispered. I'm ready. Austin. Yazzie nodded slowly. Then come. We must begin immediately. Your pursuers are almost here, and the ceremony cannot be interrupted once it starts. As they hurried toward the largest Hogan, Cordelia felt her old life slipping away like a snake shedding its skin. Whatever happened next, Cordelia Fairweather, the judge's obedient daughter. The banker's reluctant bride would cease to exist. Inside the Hogan, shadows danced on the walls as Hostine Yazzie prepared the ritual space. He sprinkled cornmeal in the 4 sacred directions while chanting in his native tongue, his voice rising and falling like wind through the canyons. Outside, Cordelia could hear horses arriving, men's voices raised in anger and frustration. Sheriff Morrison's here, Maverick reported from the doorway, his hand resting on his Colt .45. 12 men, maybe more. They're making camp at the valley entrance, good Yazzie said calmly, lighting sage and sweetgrass in a clay bowl. They will not enter this sacred space uninvited. The old agreements still hold power here. Cordelia knelt on a woven blanket, as the medicine man instructed, her ruined wedding dress pooling around her like spilled milk. The smoke from the burning herbs made her feel lightheaded, distant from her own body. To be reborn, you must first die to your old selves, Yazzie intoned, painting symbols on their foreheads with red clay. Speak your true names to the 4 winds, then let them be carried away forever. Cordelia Fairweather, she whispered, feeling strange saying her own name. It sounded foreign now, like a word in a language she'd forgotten. Maverick Ironstone, he said, his deep voice reverent in the sacred space. The medicine man nodded and added more herbs to the smoking bowl. The air grew thick and dreamlike. Now you must choose your new names, the names your spirits have always carried. Listen to your hearts, not your minds. Cordelia closed her eyes and let the smoke fill her lungs. In the swirling darkness behind her eyelids, she saw herself as she truly was, not the proper judge's daughter, but a wild creature of wind and storm. Luna, she breathed. Luna, storm chaser. Maverick's hand found hers across the sacred space. Phoenix, he said without hesitation. Phoenix Wildheart. It is done, Yazzie declared, sprinkling water from a gourd over their joined hands. Luna Stormchaser and Phoenix Wildheart, you are husband and wife in the eyes of the Great Spirit. Your old lives are ash on the wind. Through the Hogan's entrance, they could see Sheriff Morrison pacing at the valley's edge, clearly frustrated by some invisible barrier that prevented him from advancing. Reginald Ashworth stood beside him, his face red with impotent rage. They can't enter. Luna Shea must think of herself as Luna, now said wonderingly. Sacred ground, Phoenix explained, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Yazzie's people have held treaties with the spirits of this place for generations. White man's law has no power here. But even as he spoke, they could see Morrison setting up a camp. The sheriff wasn't going anywhere soon. You cannot hide here forever, Yazzie warned them. The protection extends only to this valley. Beyond the canyon walls, you will be fair game again. Luna stood, pulling off her torn veil and letting it fall to the earthen floor. Then we need a new plan. Phoenix, you said you knew these canyons. Is there another way out? Phoenix nodded slowly. The eagles flight a narrow ledge trail that leads up to the mesa top. But it's dangerous, especially in the dark. One wrong step, ... double quotes, better than facing Morrison's rifles, Luna said firmly. She was surprised by her own courage, by how natural this new boldness felt. The frightened girl who'd run from the altar was gone, replaced by someone stronger. Yazi handed them each a small leather pouch. "Traveling medicine," he explained, "for the journey ahead." In these he produced 2 sets of worn trail clothes. You cannot cross the desert in wedding finery. As Luna changed into the practical buckskin dress, she caught her reflection in a piece of polished metal. The face looking back at her was the same, but the eyes were different, fiercer, more alive. Outside, night was falling over the hidden valley. Soon it would be time to attempt their escape up the treacherous Eagle's Flight. But first, Phoenix drew her close, his lips finding hers in the sacred space. "No regrets?" he murmured against her mouth.
"Oh."
Luna whispered back, meaning it completely. "Let's go write that new story." The Eagle's Flight trail began as a crack in the canyon wall, so narrow that Phoenix had to lead the horses single file, while Luna pressed herself against the red stone to let them pass. Behind them, the lights of Morrison's camp flickered like fallen stars in the valley below. "Don't look down," Phoenix warned as they began the ascent, his voice barely audible over the desert wind. The ledge was perhaps 3 feet wide in places, crumbling away to a drop that vanished into darkness. Luna's borrowed boots found purchase on the ancient handholds carved into the rock face by generations of Navajo travelers. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but fear was mixed with exhilaration. Every step carried her further from the life she'd been expected to live. Halfway up the cliff face, they heard shouting from below. Torchlight flickered as Morrison's men discovered their escape route. "There." Sheriff Morrison's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "They're on the Eagle's Flight. Circle around to the mesa top." Phoenix cursed under his breath. "They know the country better than I thought. There's a wagon road that leads up to the rim-longer route, but they can move faster." "How long do we have?" Luna asked, her hands cramping from gripping the rough stone. "Hour, maybe 2 if we're lucky." Phoenix tested the next section of ledge with his boot, sending pebbles clattering into the void. "This trail comes out at the OLD Apache Waterhole. From there, it's open country to the next range of hills." They climbed in desperate silence, the horses snorting nervously at every gust of wind that threatened to push them off the narrow shelf. Luna's legs burned with effort, but she refused to slow down. Behind them, they could see torches moving along the valley floor. Morrison had left some men to watch the base of the cliff while others rode for the mesa top. When they finally hauled themselves over the rim, gasping in the thin mountain air, the desert spread before them like a moonlit ocean. In the distance, dust clouds marked Morrison's flanking maneuver. "Waterhole's that way," Phoenix said, pointing toward a cluster of pine and pines. "But they'll reach it first if we take the direct route." Luna studied the terrain with eyes that seemed sharper than they'd ever been before. "What about that arroyo? Curves north, but it might hide us until we can reach those hills." Phoenix grinned at her, his teeth white in the moonlight. "You're learning to think like an outlaw, Mrs. Wildheart." "Good thing," she replied, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. "Since I apparently married one." They led the horses down into the dry creek bed, its sandy bottom muffling their footsteps. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, while somewhere behind them, Sheriff Morrison and his posse searched for their trail. The arroyo wound through sagebrush and scattered boulders, sometimes barely wide enough for the horses. Luna found herself cataloging every shadow, every possible hiding place skills she'd never needed in her father's respectable house. "Tell me about California," she said softly as they walked, needing something to focus on besides the constant threat of capture. "Golden hills that roll like waves," Phoenix replied, his voice warm with memory. "Orange groves that smell like heaven. And cities where a man can disappear completely, start fresh with a new name and a pocket full of dreams." "And women?" Luna asked. "Can women disappear too? Especially women brave enough to jump off cliffs in wedding dresses?" His hand found hers in the darkness. "In California, Luna Stormchaser can be anyone she wants to be." A rifle shot cracked. Across the desert, startlingly close, they froze, listening to the echo bounce off distant mesas. Then came the sound of hoofbeats, moving fast along the rim above them. "They're getting closer," Phoenix whispered. "We need to move faster." Luna looked ahead to where the arroyo opened onto flat desert, offering no cover for miles. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. We're trapped between the hunters and the vastness of the open country. But as she gripped Phoenix's hand tighter, Luna realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever happened next, she was facing it as herself, wild, free, and ready for anything. The arroyo ended abruptly at a wall of weathered sandstone, leaving them exposed on the desert floor with nowhere to hide. Behind them, torchlight flickered. As Morrison's men followed their trail through the dry creek bed, ahead the promised hills seemed impossibly distant across miles of open sagebrush. "This way," Phoenix said, leading the horses toward a scattered collection of balanced rocks that offered the only cover in sight. "We'll have to make a stand here." Luna checked the Winchester rifle Phoenix had given her, her fingers surprisingly steady as she worked the lever action. 3 weeks ago, she'd never touched a weapon. Now the gun felt natural in her hands, an extension of her will to survive. "How many shots do we have?" she asked, settling behind a boulder that provided a clear view of the arroyo mouth. "Enough," Phoenix replied grimly, taking position with his Colt .45 and a second rifle. "But Luna, if they take me, you run for those hills. Don't look back." "Like hell," she said, and meant it. The proper language of her old life had been replaced by something earthier, more honest. "We're partners now, remember? Till death do us part?" The first of Morrison's men emerged from the arroyo, moving cautiously in the moonlight. Sheriff Morrison himself appeared next, his badge catching the starlight as he signaled for his posse to spread out. "Maverick Ironstone," Morrison called across the desert. "We're surrounded. Send out the girl, and I'll consider taking you alive." "The name's Phoenix Wildheart now," Phoenix shouted back, "and the lady makes her own choices." Luna felt a fierce pride at his words. In her father's world, men spoke for women, decided their fates without consultation. But Phoenix had never treated her as property to be claimed or protected. He'd offered her partnership, equality in their desperate gamble for freedom. "You've got 10 seconds to surrender," Morrison warned. "After that, we start shooting. Then you better make them count," Luna yelled, surprising herself with her boldness. She heard Phoenix chuckle beside her, low and appreciative. The shooting started with a muzzle flash from the arroyo mouth. Luna returned fire instinctively, her bullet sparking off stone near Morrison's position. The sheriff dove for cover, cursing. For several minutes, the desert rang with gunfire as both sides sought advantage. Luna found herself moving and shooting, with a deadly efficiency that would have shocked her former self. Each shot was calculated, purposeful, not the wild panic she might have expected, but a cold determination to protect the life she'd chosen. "They're trying to flank us," Phoenix observed, pointing to movement among the rocks to their left. 3 men, maybe 4. Luna shifted position, covering the new angle while Phoenix maintained fire on the main group. One of the flanking men showed himself too clearly, and her shot sent him scrambling back to cover with a yelp of pain. "Nice shooting," Phoenix said approvingly, but their ammunition was running low. Morrison had more men arriving, dust clouds on the horizon suggested. Reinforcements from the territorial capital? They couldn't hold this position much longer. That's when they heard it a sound like distant thunder, steady and rhythmic. War drums, echoing across the desert from the direction of the hidden valley. "Yazi," Phoenix breathed. "He's calling in the old debts." The drumming grew louder, joined by war whoops that made Morrison's men nervous. Several of them looked toward their horses, clearly thinking about retreat. "What's happening?" Luna asked. "The Apache and Navajo don't always get along," Phoenix explained, reloading quickly. "But they both hate it when outsiders bring violence to sacred ground." Morrison just made a very big mistake. In the growing dawn light, they could see riders appearing on the distant ridge, dozens of them, moving with the fluid grace of people born to the desert. Morrison's reinforcements had stopped their advance, clearly reconsidering their orders. "This changes everything," Phoenix said, his gray eyes bright with possibility. "We might just make it to those hills after all." Luna checked her ammunition, 3 shots left. But somehow, with the drums of their unlikely allies beating across the morning sky, 3 shots felt like enough. She was Luna Stormchaser now, and storms didn't run from anyone. The Apache war party crested the ridge like a force of nature, their horses moving in perfect synchronization with the thunder of drums. Morrison's men, suddenly outnumbered 3-1, began an orderly but hasty retreat toward their horses. "This is federal business," Sheriff Morrison shouted desperately at the approaching warriors. "You have no authority here," the Apache leader, a weathered man with silver braids and war paint across his cheeks, raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his English was precise and cutting. "This is Apache land guaranteed by treaty your government signed and broke 7 times. You bring guns to sacred ground. Now you leave or we settle this the old way." Luna watched in amazement as Morrison, the same man who'd terrorized frontier towns for a decade, actually backed down. The sheriff's face was purple with rage, but he holstered his weapon and signaled his men to withdraw. "This isn't over, Ironstone," Morrison called as he mounted his horse. "I'll find you eventually." "My name's Phoenix Wildheart," Phoenix called back cheerfully. "And good luck with that," as the posse retreated in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. The Apache leader rode down to where Luna and Phoenix waited among the rocks. His dark eyes studied them with frank curiosity. "Hosteen Yazzie says you have been reborn in the sacred fire," he said. "He asks us to honor the old ways of sanctuary." "We're grateful," Phoenix replied in careful Apache, showing respect with his tone and posture. "We seek only passage to the west, to start new lives." The war leader nodded slowly. "I am Nalish. Who works? My people will escort you to the territorial border. After that, your fate is your own." Luna stepped forward, still wearing her practical buckskin dress, but carrying herself with newfound confidence. "Thank you. You won't forget this kindness." Nalnish's stern expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "You have warrior's eyes now. Woman who was reborn. Use them well." The journey to the California border took 2 weeks, traveling by hidden trails and ancient water sources known only to the desert tribes. Luna learned to read the landscape like a book, to find food and shelter in country that looked barren. 2 untrained eyes. She practiced with her rifle until she could hit a playing card at 50 yards, and discovered she had a natural gift for tracking. More importantly, she and Phoenix learned to work together as true partners. He taught her the practical skills of frontier survival, while she brought an educated mind to their planning for the future. Together, they were stronger than either could have been alone. On their last morning with the Apache escort, Nalnish pulled Phoenix aside for a private conversation. Luna watched from a distance as the 2 men spoke in serious tones, occasionally glancing in her direction. "What was that about?" she asked when Phoenix returned to their camp. "He offered us a place with his people," Phoenix said quietly. "Said we'd earn the right to call ourselves Apache if we wanted." Luna considered this, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "And what did you tell him?" "We were honored, but we had our own path to follow." Phoenix's arms came around her from behind, solid and warm and infinitely reassuring. "California is still calling to us, Luna Stormchaser." 3 months later, they stood on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching ships come and go from San Francisco Harbor. Phoenix had found work as a guide for wagon trains, while Luna had discovered a talent for writing her account of their escape and transformation, was being serialized in the San Francisco Chronicle under the pen name A Desert Rose. "Any regrets?" Phoenix asked, echoing the question he'd posed on their first desperate flight from Millbrook Village. Luna smiled, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing. Behind them lay 1,000 miles of desert and mountain, pursuit and danger, transformation and rebirth. Ahead stretched the golden promise of California, where Luna Stormchaser and Phoenix Wildheart could build whatever life they dared to dream. "Only one," she said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him as the Pacific sunset painted the sky in spectacular colors. "That we waited so long to jump off that first cliff together." The waves crashed against the rocks below, eternal and ever-changing, like the love that had carried them across a continent and into their new life. In the distance, a ship's horn sounded, perhaps calling other adventurers to try their luck. In the Golden West, Luna and Phoenix Wildheart were already home.